again, Michael Ware with the Iowa Firearms Coalition. We have with us today Joe Hajny from LMT Defense. You may know them as LMT. You may know them as Lewis Machine and Tool. If you don't know them, we're going to help you with that. You should know them. So it's always great when we can visit with somebody, Joe, that embodies the spirit around the Second Amendment, that works with Second Amendment tools. It's even better when these folks are from Iowa and Iowa Company. So we are pleased to have you on Warrior Wednesday today, man. So tell us a little bit. Everybody knows who you are, but there might be one or two that don't, okay? So walk us through real quick what LMT Defense is.
So LMT, I guess the elevator pitch, Mike, is, we've been around since 1980 as a manufacturer that has focused on the defense industry. Now, the core of what we do is for, U.S. military or international customers, but we do a lot of commercial work. And that's one of the things that people may not understand is, that we do service the regular commercial industry and supporting users across the country of our firearms. Since 1980, we've done a little bit of everything, just, simple contract work for the government where we're making components or parts for existing U.S. DoD weapon systems. We've also done a lot of OEM work. In the early 90s, we worked with companies like Armalite or Knights Armament, Remington. We've done a little bit of stuff for them way back in the day. And then in the early 2000s, late 90s, we kind of embodied our own brand. And Lewis Machine and Tool started producing its own brand of firearms, mainly developed from innovations that we made to the AR or the M4 platform based off of needs from warfighters of that time. The monolithic upper receiver was the first big patent that Carl Lewis had, and that was to make a better upper receiver and barrel system for the existing fighting rifle for America's service members. And then from there, we just kept rolling, developing other things, contract after contract with, foreign nations as well as the United States military. Currently, the big ones include the L129, A1, and now the A2 for the UK Ministry of Defence. New Zealand Defence Force, a couple different firearms, including what you see behind me is one of their systems with a grenade launcher, DMRs. Estonia, a couple different weapon systems. And that's just to name a few that, we're in, I think, 42 countries across the globe.
42 countries. Wow. I'm telling you what. I don't think many people are able to fathom just how many that is. You say 42 and they're like, okay, 42. That is a lot of square mileage. That is a lot of people packing around stuff on slings. I mean, that's a ton of weapons. That's very, very cool.
Right. And that's one of the things that, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Obviously, we would love to support the commercial market more and deliver more to your local dealer or to whatever website you service that, you go and you buy guns from. However, our bread and butter is defense manufacturing, and we're entertaining contracts daily, globally with our allies, and always supporting war efforts. And with that comes innovation, comes development, and the brand that we've built into today. So that's one of the things we want to do more, but our growth is tied really to that industry that we serve.
So you walk through pretty quickly the progression of the company from the 80s to current. So for people to kind of understand what this looks like, I don't know if Carl Lewis, I don't know if he sat around and said, boy, I'd sure like to sell to foreign governments all day long in terms of small arms. Or was it really something like, I'm a pretty good machinist. I have a small fleet of machines. let's keep these machines busy, because I don't
Yeah.
think people understand how things actually progress. Because when you
Right.
start a machine shop, what you really need is a print. You need some sort of document. You need a set of plans
Mhm.
to tell you, I want this to come out looking like this, and I want you to use this material to do it. It's
Right.
no more complex than that. It really isn't. But you can take that a lot of directions, and I think it's interesting that Lewis Machine and Tool did that. Is there
Mhm.
anything that you can speak to about that so people
Yeah.
can grasp that?
Yeah, and so a little bit of history about Carl and LMT is so Carl at the time when LMT was founded was actually in the employment of Springfield Armory in Kelowna at the time. They moved to Geneseo since, but at the time they were in Kelowna, Illinois, and there was an opportunity that came about, and I believe Carl at the time was probably 20, and he had found, or there an opportunity came up for a replacement component. I believe it was a bolt or something along those lines for Department of Defense. And it's just like you said, here's the spec, here's the drawing. You know, it's been around since the 60s. You just got to be able to machine it. Now, I don't think what had happened was Springfield either wasn't interested, didn't have the capacity. But there was an opportunity for Carl to get engaged with that. One thing led to another. He, delivered on this contract, and then saw that, here is a whole wealth of business opportunity for folks to go out and just, grab by the horns, because you have customers that already know what they want. They already know the tolerances. And all you've got to do is just meet their demand and have a good competitive price. So that's just the ongoing development of that. I think the next big one in the late 80s, early 90s was a grenade launcher barrel. And that really kicked off our, beginnings in the M203 industry. And we have some of these milestones that we've kept. I haven't got some in here, but we have some of these marketing milestones. I have a news article from the local paper here, and they interviewed Carl. And I think this was in 91 or 1990, but they were still referring it as the Persian Gulf War rather than Desert Storm, Desert Shield. You know what I mean? So it was that early that he was supporting the Persian Gulf War with manufacturing these replacement grenade launcher barrels for the Department of Defense. And, utilizing that machinery, expanding, finding opportunities. And then, maybe the government has a slowdown in purchasing. And that's where the commercial market opens, where another brand will have a demand. And then utilizing those same machines, that same machinery, and knowledge workforce, quality control, you utilize it to make more money somewhere else. And that's where the ongoing development of weapon systems and components, business development with other manufacturers went. So it is like drinking from a fire hose to see that ramp up. But that's really how it got started. And Carl is today still very active in day-to-day operations. I've never seen anything like it in the industry, up to and including I've seen him throwing salt on the sidewalk in the Iowa winters, before the first shift comes in to do their work for the day.
I like that kind of engaged leadership. That's fantastic. I think that there's a misconception out there that when people hit it big, that they often set back in their easy chair with their feet up, and every 4 or 5 months they'll stop into the office to make sure it's still there. That hasn't been my experience in the firearms industry.
No.
Most of these folks get up and they go to work. It's not uncommon to see their vehicle there Sundays when nobody else is around, first thing in the morning, you name it. That's
Absolutely.
not uncommon at all. These are hardworking people. And I think that appropriately, I've never worked for Carl. I wouldn't know, but I'm assuming he demands that from his people, because you have a quality product you have to put out in a timely fashion, and that's demanding. That's hard.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is the mantra here. That is our kind of our corporate ethos is to, put yourself in the position of the customer and say, is this what I would want defending my life or my son's life? I mean, I don't know the exact ratio of veterans that we have here, but we have a lot of veteran employment down in the machine shop here in the sales team. These are guys that have spent time serving our country, and then they come in here and expect the same quality of that that firearm to then go back out to brothers and sisters still serving. So
fantastic. Okay, so is it safe to ask you what your journey's been like, Joe?
Yeah, my journey is unique. It's one of those things that it's based around my passion for the industry and working with customers and working with certain individual users and stuff. When I came on, there is a time my previous employer was Armalite when they were in Geneseo still, and they were at a point where they were relocating the corporation down to Arizona. And I had bumped into the guys from LMT, going to the trade shows and stuff. We're usually all on the same flights. It still is today. We'll see the folks from Springfield Armory or Rock River on the same flights out to SHOT Show or whatever. And, we discussed, what are you doing? What's going on? How are things? And, I just said, not really ready to give up the bitter cold winters and the super humid summers. And, Arizona just doesn't sound like that much fun. And they said, well, why don't you come over to LMT? So one thing led to another. And I came over as a commercial sales manager or key account manager initially. And then that role developed into the commercial sales manager. I took on government, LE, OEM sales, as well as the marketing. So at the time, LMT didn't really do much marketing. And as of today, I'll be honest, a lot of our products are sold before they're produced. So the need for, daily ads and guns and ammo and stuff for us aren't really there. Ruger and a couple other brands that are out there have a huge need for a lot of that. We're now trying to get back to maybe a little bit more brand awareness campaigns. And that'll be some marketing you'll see coming from us here in the near future. But my role now is basically just to do business development for LMT. I assist the international team, the commercial sales team. I still work directly with federal government and law enforcement, as well as OEMs. So we still work with other firearm manufacturers to produce components for their weapon systems. So there's a lot of other brands that you may not know of or know that LMT parts exist in.
I'm sure.
There's a lot of that. So that's my role with LMT. Assisting all of the teams, do a little bit of product development. That's kind of my passion is to take a look at what customers are needing solutions for and finding solutions for those customers.
Fantastic, man. That doesn't sound like a bad gig.
No, we get to play with guns every day, and the whole thing, you do what you love and you never work a day in your life, is true. There are times that people say, well, it must be nice to, just go shoot guns. Well, there's probably a lot of red-blooded Iowans that get to shoot a lot more than I do. I think I've shot twice this year for my own self. Most times I'm going out, it's for work. And, unfortunately, a lot of times, I don't get the time to get out and shoot for myself. But spend a lot of time behind a computer, and that's where that work is done. When it's out on the range, pretty much everything else is done and ready to go. Yeah.
Well, it's still fun to be part of that. I don't know. There are misconceptions that people have about this industry. The people that are in it, I think that they would say, oh, okay, Joe must have it great. He gets to, like you said, go to play with guns all the time. Well, yeah, Joe does have it great on many levels, but oh, by the way, Joe's more often growing bifocals in front of a computer screen more often than he's using his hip new eyewear at the range because it requires that kind of work. I mean, we're at a pair of computers right now doing this because this is what it requires. And that's good. I won't complain about that. I enjoy doing this. But we talk about range use. We talk about getting out there and doing it. I need to mention that IFC, if you go to our website, iowafc.org, you'll see a tab for what we call the trusted partners. And those are people that we've entered into collaborations with, and they've been kind enough to offer discount codes on services, tangible goods, you name it, all kinds of things that you can use. And I think that you're kind of silly at this point if you're going to buy from any of these people and you're not an IFC member, because your membership will quickly allow you access to enough savings that you're nuts if you don't do it. So if you're going to go out to the range and do that, you might not see Joe there yet. You might not see me there yet, but we'll quickly follow. So keep that in mind when you're purchasing. Check out IFC's trusted partners, and that list grows all the time. So we're glad to have those collaborations. So anyway, I did want to ask you, Joe, and you're welcome to beg off any personal questions if you're not up for it. That's fine. These aren't gotcha podcasts or interviews. You know that. I'm curious, though, from working in the industry, from being around it and then inside it, and then moving from an Armalite corporation to an LMT, do you have any surprises? I'm curious how that went. If you knew what you were going to expect and walked in and you found it, or whether you got there and say, wow, this is different than I thought. I mean, I'm really interested.
Well, I'll say that I've got close connections with a lot of different manufacturers, and obviously working with as an OEM manufacturing rep, I get to peek into not only other brands and see kind of how their inner workings are, but as well as our sources for outside services like coatings and stuff like that, or maybe heat treat. So the one thing that is very common across the industry is there is a lot of passion. You see, folks and individuals that will gravitate towards a certain business venture, whether it's in sales or marketing and stuff like that. And they're continuously passionate about what they're doing, regardless of what brand they're with. Now, my transition from Armalite to LMT was very linear. The two brands have same, general focus. Obviously, Armalite was more commercially focused, where LMT is more defense industry. And by defense industry, I mean, professional end users, law enforcement, government, military. Now, there was some of that at Armalite, but not nearly on the scale here. Our scale, I would say on some years, it could be as much as 80% of our manufacturing goes to defense customers, whether that's, our M203 contract for the United States government, or to, M203s going to Estonia, to mount onto their weapon systems. That was one, adjustment, is that business focus is, where is LMT going? What keeps LMT not only profitable, but employing local people, growing as a brand in our community. So we want to be able to hire more people. In 2019, we moved from our facility in Illinois to our facility in Iowa. We picked up, I think, 20,000 more square feet and probably another 70 employees. We run 3 shifts here, as well as some volunteer overtime on the weekends. And it's a big thing for us to continue branching out with the local manufacturing community, because here in the Quad Cities, you've got a lot of big manufacturers, anything from what is Arconic, or Alcoa, Deere, Caterpillar, Cobham, the Arsenal. We are in a very big manufacturing hub. So getting individuals that know how to run machines is not hard. What we are trying to do is curate a team of manufacturing individuals who want to work on firearms, and see something like behind me. If you work for, Bob's Machine Corporation or something like that versus Lewis Machine and Tool, you might make a component for John Deere, whether it's a pin for, a loader or something like that. But all you're seeing is probably that raw component. You might not even see it go to coating and what it looks like after that.
Yeah.
It might go to coating and then off to the next person. You never see the finished product unless you're out in the field and you say, hey, I machined that. Here at LMT, not only do you see the finished product, but our end users come in. They take tours. We talk to them on the range. They'll speak in front of the entire company. We had the Estonian ambassador to the United States here a couple of years ago, as well as their Minister of Defense. And they kind of said, hey, we want to just let you know what you're doing for our country. That we have the first new weapon systems that the country has seen in 25 years. And these are utilized by not just regular forces, but are what we consider our National Guard, the conscripts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And these people are supporting and defending the country daily from the Russians or other invasion. So when it comes to the industry, there is a lot of similarity. And when I look at other brands and stuff like that, there are a lot of what you would call LMTs that are out there, very defense-oriented brands. And then what they do is they make really good commercial product, and there is a magnet to those products because people want weapon systems that they can trust. They know that they've been vetted in the field of combat and are going to be an American-made reliable weapon system that they can count on for generations. And that's one of the things that we focus on here. A little moniker that we have is a marketing thing is a hashtag MyLMT. Because usually when you have one of our rifles or something like that, you take it out to the range and someone says, hey, what are you shooting today? You never say, oh, this is my my quad rail 5.56 ambidextrous lower, whatever. It's got a Trigicon on it and stuff like that. You say, this is my LMT. Right. Because the brand name, the understood, history and the nature of what's gone into making this monolithic upper ambidextrous fighting rifle is already kind of known. And if someone doesn't, they'll say, well, what's an LMT or what you got there or something. And then you get a chance to explain. And, by the end of that, discussion or whatever, there's already another customer brewing, because they say, that's nice. And what's interesting is about our weapon systems and the way the market has really changed is younger buyers, your 25 to 35, we'll call them, or even you're younger than that. Today's generation gets a lot of crap. However, they're one of the most educated. They have the most wealth of information, right here. It's all available to them in a heartbeat. And so what they're doing is using every resource to say, what is the best I can get for my money? And there still will be scenarios where they'll buy something, upgrade it, sell it, buy something else, upgrade it, sell it. But then there's a generation that'll say, this is my first rifle and I'm buying an LMT. And it means a lot to us, one, because they're trusting us with something, not just, their hard-earned income, but a weapon system that if they can only buy one, and this is defending, a home from invasion, bad guy, bumping the night to, hey, we saw what happened in 2020. I don't want to be caught, unawares. I got a family to protect. I need something I can trust. And if I can spend X amount of money, this is where it's going. So
that's changed quite a little bit in recent years. It's most of the time there wasn't as much education out there, or it was different. I'm 50 now, so I can remember going to and writing letters or emails to places asking for product literature to be sent. And then, not all, but most people would send you something, and there would be a manila envelope show up in the mail, and you'd crack it open, and you would pour through the pages, reading everything. I can remember
Right.
sitting down with Brownell's big book, an inch thick, and
Sure,
just
sure.
going through it every time there was a new one, and doing that. But now it's so quick with the access to this material. You can really be discerning if you're paying attention. And be very discerning. I mean, you can get right down the nitty gritty. And so I am seeing customers that show up that are far more educated when they roll up as a newbie than ever before. Now, unfortunately, there are net rangers out there and keyboard commandos that, well, for lack of explaining it in a better way, somebody should set them down and break all their fingers with a hammer. They had not to be on the internet. They shouldn't use a keyboard. Smartphones should be removed from their access. But usually there's somebody who's willing to roll up and say, wait a minute, the world according to GARP over here is junk. That's not true. So most people have a really, really good idea of what they want or how they want it when they show up. And so their access to things as simple as your site, the reviews, YouTube, all these other things that they can use for discernment through the roof. Absolutely through the roof.
Well, and that's one of the things that's really important when it comes to marketing, and something that I spend a lot of time with. And you're absolutely right. If you spend a lot of time reading the comments, you're going to find negativity anywhere. There are people that when they wake up in the morning, all they want to focus on is negativity. And it doesn't matter what they find or what happens in their life. They're going to find the worst scenario. However, if you pay attention to, tone them out and pay attention to the positive stuff, or the unbiased reviews, or the reviews that are very open, and how test results are done, or where they got their opinions from, or what their relationships are with brands, whether it's, X weapon system versus Y weapon system. Back in the day, we would have to wait for recoil to come out, and fingers crossed that this month they have a review of 2 weapon systems that we're interested in, or they might have one, and then 6 months later, there's the other, and you have to try to cross compare that. I remember, I grew up in a very firearms influenced family, and my grandfather had, decades worth of old, guns and ammo, or modern handgun, or whatever. And I would spend hours poring over those just to see what's out there. Yeah. But today, if you want, you could take brand X, brand Y, throw it into Google, and see if somebody's got something, a review of exactly what you're after. And you could be, really on the kind of the fringes of what the market's even got available to you, and there's probably someone that's reviewed it. Yeah. So you can really, pull that information in and kind of assess it over multiple sources to kind of weed out maybe the singular cases to find the average of what that weapon system is going to give you. Yeah. And then make a good decision based on it. And that's fantastic. Even if they don't buy an LMT, what I hope from our industry is people just use education to make the best decision for what they have going. Sure. And you see brand influencers or content creators, one of the big things that they push is, if you only have X amount of dollars, you can buy an entire weapon system for that, and outfitted magazines, an optic, and all that stuff. Or you can buy maybe one that has subpar performance. However, you could spend a bunch more money on ammo, or go to a training class, or, go shoot a performance competition like a 2-gun match or something like that, and utilize it to find out what works for you. They're pushing that as an alternative, and that is highly encouraged, because the one thing that we dislike the most is customers that never shoot our weapon systems. Right. They handle them with kit gloves, and they never come out of the safe. These weapon systems aren't meant to be scrutinized for, I got the anodize in this one little corner right here doesn't match the anodize everywhere else. And while we still try to take care of that customer in that scenario, we're like, listen, here's a secret. If you go out and shoot 30 rounds from that thing, it's going to get scratched from the brass that's ejecting from it. I don't know if you're aware of this. And, so that's one of the things that we want people to focus on is shoot, enjoy the weapon system, use it for what we built it for. And that's hard use.
I remember, I'm not at liberty to say who it was, and I wish that I could, because it would be fun to, I'm sure they remembered. It was not something that was forgettable. But I was in front of a group of officers that were looking at weapon systems, and I was selling them. I was prepared to sell them LMT, and like, well, I want this one, I want that one. I'm like, well, I'm not going to bid that. Why not? I'm like, well, I said, I'm basically the go-between. They're building the weapon. I'm adding a few tweaks, but I need this to be as reliable as humanly possible. This is what I would prefer to use. I'm most comfortable with it, I put a reliability package on top of what they've already done well, and I'm very confident with that. And they're like, well, just how confident are you? And we were at the range, and I said, well, I'm confident enough. I'll drag it up and down this driveway, and it'll work. Yeah. And I assumed that would be enough. And they're like, put your money where your mouth is. So I grabbed a length of rope, I tied it around the front sight base, and I drove with a four-wheeler down the gravel and back. Yep. Picked it up, fired it, everything's just fine. And they're like, okay. So coincidentally, yes, I did get the order. It went very well. But the fact of the matter is, you talk about a purely cosmetic issue, and we want, anybody that's building anything wants it cosmetically correct. But by the way, let's keep in context what this is going to do and how it's going to do it. And by the way, beyond that, very confident that this will fire under rough use and rough circumstance. So you got to keep it in context. But going back quite a little ways to something you mentioned, that somebody from Estonia, the government was over there, and they were walking through and seeing your people and relaying over in a very personal fashion what this meant to them. I think that must have been very cool. I kind of envy some of your folks out there on the floor that got to experience that, because I think that what we haven't done in the firearms industry at all, or not nearly enough, is make sure that people understood this on a personal level. It's one thing to have equipment that you sell and customers that you service. But when you have somebody that shows up and say, I represent my government and all these people, and what you do makes a difference to us very personally in this way, that must have been quite something for the team there at LMT to behold, because I would like to think that made a lasting impression on those folks, and it should.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there was definitely, I can't remember the exact context of the story that he gave, but there was a kind of a goosebump moment or something like that, explaining over the last 100 years their defeat and repelling the forces of communism twice, not just once, but twice over the last 100 years, and being able to maintain that freedom. And I was fortunate enough during the initial fielding of these weapon systems, myself and one of our other guys here, Rob, we went over to Estonia, and we did kind of a train the trainer thing with these guys, where give them an armorer's class, but then we did an operator's class. So these guys are coming from different weapon systems. So we got to get a little bit personal with them and talk to them about kit and how they can improve reloads and stuff from stored magazines. But then we got to give them firsthand experience on shooting an AR or an M16 platform, because some of these guys never touched one before. Some of them had, through working with other people. But in these conversations and over the days of working, on the ground with these guys, we realized that the Estonians are more American than some Americans are. They hold the same freedoms valuable. They hold the same morals valuable. When we got there, this was during the height of COVID. This is August of 2020. Okay. We stepped off the plane, not a mask to be seen. And the two explanations we were given was, over here, the masks don't really, we've just assessed that they don't really help. But they also say, we're used to, they say, hey, you need to be 6 feet away from each other. They said, as Estonians, we're used to staying 10 feet away from each other. So we're not used to that. But this is also during the time of the election, the 2020 election. And, their big thing was you have to understand what not having Trump as a president will look like. And they spelled it out. These guys that have, been under the rule of communism in the last 30 years or whatever, had come through and basically said, you're not going to like what you end up with. And they said, for your sake, we hope you don't have to go through that. And unfortunately, we had 4 years of a not desirable, administration. However, we came through it and understanding what they are going through and kind of their advice towards Americans. And that's something that most people don't understand. And it took us delivering a weapon system to these folks in Europe to kind of say, who are we as Americans and what do we hold valuable? And there's a lot of things that we, take for granted and like our liberties, our freedoms, that we see it right now today. There's a lot of folks that, without getting too political about it, but there are a lot of things that we just don't really hold as like sacred to being an American, and that other countries look at us and say, yeah, you really should, be careful with that, because if you lose, not only the right to bear arms for one, or your freedom of speech, if you lose the right to bear arms, there's a chance your freedom of speech is going to follow, so, and that's one of the big things that, working with them, not only them coming back to here and saying, we appreciate what your community is doing for our community and our national sovereignty, but going there and seeing it firsthand, seeing the Russian buildings, seeing the former Soviet bases and stuff like that. And what we went through a couple museums and we talked to some older folks and stuff, and understanding what Soviet control was like for a community there versus what we have now in Estonia. And it was just, it was powerful. It was extremely impressive and something that I'll remember for a long time, and I won't take for granted, what we have here.
Well, you summed it up there really well, because most Americans, most people listening to this, don't have any idea that they've won the birth lottery by virtue of being born here and when they've been born. Some people push back on me when I say that, but I've mentioned it a lot. And I'm like, listen, raise your hand if you want to be born in Rwanda any time of the last 3,000 years. Sounds pretty horrible. It's been tough there for a long time. I mean, you don't have any idea what truly hardships are in most cases, at least cultural hardships, because it's not been that bad. And that kind of leads into a question I want to ask. Did you do a lot of prep in terms of learning the history, the culture, whatever else, in order to make that trip, or did this slap you in the face when you got there?
Well, to be honest, and this is being an individual, and most Americans, we kind of get a different impression from folks from outside the country, about not being well traveled or well versed or whatever. To be honest, I couldn't have told you where Estonia was on a world map before going there, or engaging in the contract and the business with Estonia. So when I got there, it did definitely come as more of a shock. I wasn't aware as much of the history of their democracy and how they've progressed as a people, and what their goals and aspirations are. But that's one of the things that people just don't understand about the United States is, you could drive for 24 hours and not leave the state of Texas, where you could drive for 8 hours in Europe and go through 6 countries.
Yep.
All with different political systems, cultural beliefs, everything. So yes, as a people, the United States is, I would say, challenged with understanding, and that's the big thing, is just to see the perspective of what we have versus what could be, and there are a lot of things that we take advantage of and take for granted. But yeah, working with Estonia, we did later on, obviously, in the development of that weapon system, making sure that it is meeting every criteria they had, because they had a very big list, going through the testing for it, the quality control, everything that led up to, developing the weapon system, delivering the weapon system, and then supporting it downrange, was something we put a lot of care into. Yeah. One of the things that when we were over there, you're familiar with ARs and stuff like that, and the intricacies of them. The J-wire in a hammer is the component, for the other folks that are watching that don't understand, is the component that really holds the hammer pin in on your low receiver. Well, they said, what happens if the J-wire breaks? And I said, well, if the J-wire breaks, it's staked in there through the body. You call us up, you order a new hammer. And they said, yeah, but what if we can't do that? And I was like, what do you mean, what if you can't do that? That's how you replace a broken J-wire. You could buy the wire, but it might be better for you just to buy the new hammer and then replace your spring on it. And they said, we have to, as a country, prepare for a scenario where we have to rely internally on our own resources. Yeah. And so they started looking at one of the other, I think it might have been a trigger spring, like with the legs and the skis. And they said, is that about the same thickness of wire? I said, yeah. They said, could we cut that off, put it in there and stake it ourselves? And I was like, you probably could if you had to. And they're like, all right, that's not what we're going to do, but we just want to understand how these weapon systems work in a scenario where we're either isolated or kind of left to be creative with repairs or something like that. And but it's something we don't think about. You look at U.S. law enforcement, their Glock breaks. Just get a new handgun. And we don't think about, what if we've got to repair that, with limited resources or means. Right. Not that LMT is not going to support us, but what if LMT can't support us?
What if we're isolated and we can't ship it in there or whatever else? I mean, you wouldn't. Joe Blow would not think about there being a failure within the hammer to begin with, because that's a statistical zero. I mean, I'm sure it's probably happened, but it's never happened to me or anybody that I know. And I'm around ARs all day long, all the time, and I have been for 20 years. So to sit back and say, what happens if this obscure thing that never breaks, it is all honestly probably one of the most reliable parts in any of these systems. Sure. And what do I do about it then? Means you're truly thinking long term, because what's our access to these things if we're cut off? Well, we're going to send her out with candles in a cave and see if we can figure it out. And we want to be further down the road than that. Right. We don't often think in those terms around here, but we should. We should be more prepared, no question.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Okay. So Estonia, I don't. Just for your edification, if it sounds like that made a lasting impression on you, Joe. If you want to dedicate many hours to reading a book that's very, very hard to read, you should pick up Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago, and you'll start to understand exactly what the people in Estonia are talking about. Because once you have truly communist rule, and then you have to sway back and forth, like, for example, this may ruffle some feathers, but the folks in Ukraine, okay, they've either been under a communist regime or under some sort of organized crime rule in terms of the tyranny for a long time. And so it's a very, very challenging place to live when you're looking at two really lousy scenarios. And so we don't bring that to bear very often. So if people in America, I think, should be reading a book like that. Again, that was Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago. Technically, there are 3 books, but the first one will occupy many, many months.
Sure. One of the things that we, when we were over there, we were encouraged to go to, there's a museum in downtown Talon. Ironically, it was nearly next door to the Russian embassy that's there. But it was an old, it's in downtown. It's an old town, Talon, which is more of almost, if you look at the aerial view of it on Google Earth or something, it almost looks like an old fort or an old castle wall. And you can actually, when you're walking around, you can see where this old wall is now being consumed by residences. It's kind of built into buildings and stuff, and you can see where it existed and what this old town looked like. But there is an old prison, an old Russian prison down there that is now it's a museum that kind of talks about some of the problems and the atrocities that happened in World War II. So the Soviets came into Estonia, to say, hey, watch out for those Nazis. We're going to take care of you. But what had happened was, like, overnight, tens of thousands of able-bodied workers were deported from Estonia to Russia. And some were just never heard of again. I mean, and then years later, they were able to come home to their families, but they were just loaded up and taken to work in camps and mines and factories and just gone. So imagine your father, your husband, your brother, a son, something like that, just no longer being there anymore to support the war effort for a completely other nation. And this wasn't voluntary. This wasn't, they weren't given an option. And there were women that were taken. There were children that were taken, and obviously not, infants and toddlers and stuff. But, at the time, if you were a 13-year-old boy, you were a fighting age, so you were sent to work somewhere. And tens of thousands of individuals were just gone overnight. And like we were told, a bunch just never came back. They weren't explained, did they die? What had happened? Nothing. No solutions, no anything. And it's just, what could happen with Ukraine? What could happen with another country, Lithuania or Finland or something like that? Somebody else that's on that border. And what are their concerns? A lot of the same. And that's why.
Well, they've seen it. They understand it. They, like you said, there are museums. There is a lasting history that's daily in their face as they walk by it, say, this is what happens when you trust the wrong people. This is what happens when you give up things you shouldn't give up.
Right.
This is what happens when your buddies tell you, well, let's be reasonable, Joe. Come on, Michael. Do you really need a 30-round magazine? Well, okay, maybe I'll settle for a 20, or, the next thing you know, it's gone. And you've got no way to defend yourself. You've got no way to make that oral argument, because you'll find yourself in a gulag working until you pass, and that's it. There are people who are watching and listening to this that don't understand that. They probably think I'm a little crazy or nutty anyway for saying it, but it just happens to be the truth. You don't back up on stuff like that. I mean, I think there's some old boys like George Washington and a few others that would probably tell you, don't slack off on freedoms and liberties. You want to protect those.
Well, and that's, our continued growth, obviously with contracts, either domestically or internationally, have shown that is not an isolated incident. We've got a couple other contracts right now. One that was, it's kind of low key. We did a soft announcement on it. We won a partnership or to develop some weapon systems with Switzerland, who have been at the center, not necessarily in an aggression or a defensive posture, but more of a neutrality and kind of just a peacekeeper, if you will, for a lot of nations for a lot of years. But they do have a new focus, and that's one of our weapon systems that's currently in development to be deployed over there. And besides New Zealand, Estonia, you got the other countries there, the British. Some of those folks, New Zealand and Britain, and as well as Estonia, not only are they concerned about the home front and utilizing LMTs for that, but they have outreach programs. Estonia, it was for years constantly supporting an effort in Mali, in Africa, and trying to, maintain a semblance of order and preservation of the democracy that they're trying to develop there. Obviously, the British are fighting alongside the U.S. in every conflict. I don't know of any conflict that we don't share. And their weapon system, the L129A2, is one of their core fighting rifles, that has seen use since 2009. And so what we're discussing here and the weapon systems that we develop, that regular citizens can purchase as well. The A2, the British DMR gun, when you purchase that as an owner in Iowa or Texas or Arizona or something like that, you're not getting a watered down or a civilian version. We are releasing for commercial sales the exact weapon system. So
I was going to ask about that, what the chief differences are, and they must be pretty similar then.
Yeah. In the past, the A2 or the A1, our quad rail version, that cosmetically had some differences. That there was some engraving on it that was a little bit different. But for all intents and purposes, the exact same weapon system that a commercial user could buy is what is being purchased by the Ministry of Defense. So that's one of those things that not only our pride of supporting other nations, but our pride of supporting, regular enthusiasts, civilians that want to defend their freedoms and liberties, as well as the collector or something like that. There are folks that put a lot of value into firearms of conflict. Whether it's something like this behind me here, that is a real New Zealand rifle. However, we sell a reference version of it as well. So you could buy it in the fashion that it's sold there. Obviously, semi-auto. We'd love to be able to support all the liberties, but unfortunately, we're not there yet. But you buy the semi-auto version, but it is everything. The trigger, the bolt carrier group, the barrel, everything about it is the exact same equipment. There isn't a different part number for that. So
probably better snag me one.
Yeah. The New Zealand one is a pretty classic. It was what kicked off Mars for us, which is modular ambidextrous rifle system. That kicked off the ambi gun for us, and the ambi receivers have now. At one point when I came on, Mars was an upgrade, if you will, or a package or a weapon system that you could buy that was a different tier. As it sits today, Mars is our core. You can see the number of firearms in Mars that are listed, and that's just some of them. We have a myriad of other options that can be purchased, different calibers, different barrel lengths, different handguard lengths, dealer and distributor exclusives. And then you have the Defender line, which is our standard, the AR that everybody knows, the lower that everybody knows. We still offer that, but it's produced in much, much lower quantities. And there isn't a whole lot of focus on it other than supporting it as necessary to customers.
So was the Defender 2000 brought out in the year 2000, or why does it have that name on the
I believe, and getting into the history of it and see, one of the things with working at LMT and with Carl is there are probably brands that are out there that their ownership maybe had a background in sales or marketing or business development, which not saying Carl doesn't, but his core is in the machinery and in thinking of creative ways to use a CNC, developing resources to fix solutions that are in the industry. In 2000, his idea was, hey, I need to keep some sort of marketing historical record of, the first time we utilized this or that, or, things that could be used for historical advertising purposes later on. And they're like, man, did we really sell serial number 1 of something, like out to the market? And it was, well, yeah, why wouldn't you? Why are you holding on to that? And I'm like, it'd be kind of cool, man. So when we moved over here in 2019, the first receiver that came off of the Mars line, both Mars H, Mars L, which is a semi-auto 308 and 76 or 556 weapon systems, we snagged those, and those are in the vault over here. And we're going to have some shadow boxes made for the first Iowa weapons made. Sadly, the first Defender lower, Defender 2000 that left, I believe Pete Brownell owns it because it shipped to Brownell's as one of their strip lower orders or something like that. And sure. I reached out to Paul when he was still there. I said, hey, you don't have this serial number by chance, do you? And he goes, I think we do, but I think it's utilized over here or something. We're going to do some pictures with it or what's wrong with it? And I said, nothing's wrong with it. It's just the first one we made here in Iowa. And he was like, well, that's something. And he goes, we're going to go take that real quick and pull it out of our vault and put it into another vault over. So Brownells owns one of the first Iowa made firearms that LMT did. But that was one of the things that, when Defender 2000 came out, and I believe it was around 2000, there wasn't a whole lot of need to focus on capturing historical marketing, or things like that, nostalgia. The MRP, the monolithic system, that came out our patents and stuff like that are early 2000s, 2002, 2003, stuff like that. But we were working on those in the early 2000s. So this is a 25-year-old upper receiver that as of today is still top of its class in capability and robustness and lethality for, your defense users and stuff like that. Its ability to be modular. And that's something that, I've had to ask Carl, why? What made you do this? And then getting the backstory, the working with SOCOM, and they had a need. In the late 90s, guys were still using duct tape and hose clamps to put flashlights on M4s, and there was U.S. SOCOM and Crane had said we need a solution, we need better products, and this was something that was developed to service that. And there are a lot of things that we don't hold on to, and we didn't think at the time were probably, necessary, because we're focused on making the product, right? It's right. Not, hey, don't necessarily frame the first dollar bill. Let's use that and reinvest it into a better machine coolant or tools for lathes and stuff like that. So that's how LMT has gone is what can we do to reinvest into our brand to continue progress? And those are things that we're seeing today.
So did LMT develop the SOP mod stock? Am I right or wrong about that?
Yeah, that is correct. So with Crane, we developed that, and it later became the Crane stock. But that was something that they had asked us for a solution on, and in the early 2000s or late 90s or something, we developed that. So we made the first molds for it, and then obviously we don't do any molding internal, but the SOP mod stock was originated with LMT. Now I know P5 Systems later on had a version of it and still does, that I believe has been issued as well. But the originator of it is LMT Defense or Lewis Machine.
That thing's unbelievable. I mean,
it's still a valuable stock today.
Oh, very much. Yes. I mean, it's my personal preference. I mean, if I'm building something for myself or a family member or whatever else, it's going to have that stock on it because it's that good. I mean, they're absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So let's see where we've covered a couple items that I wanted to. I think we're in pretty good shape. There's probably a lot more to go over. Frankly, Joe, it might be a situation where we see if we can invite you back to talk a little bit more. Maybe we'll ask people out there, and I'm starting to do this. Folks listening, if you've got a question for Joe, I can link you up. IFC can get you those people, but you need to remember LMTdefense.com is a very easy website to navigate to and through. So check them out. If you've got questions, they can help you. We'll do that. If you've got questions you would like us to ask Joe when he comes back, if he's willing, then by all means, leave them in the comments. If you got questions, comments, concerns, we'll see if we can handle them. I would like to be a catalyst for anything like that. As always, we want you to visit the site, iowafc.org. We appreciate your membership. Any donations you might be interested in. Plus, we're running raffles now. So if you visit the site, you can see a little tab there for the raffle. You can buy your tickets there, the whole 9 yards. So keep that in mind. We'd love to see you participate in that way, and we'll go from there. But again, Joe Hajny with LMT Defense, Lewis Machine and Tool, LMT. I am really, really tickled that you spent some time with us today. Thank you for that.
Well, yeah, I appreciate being on here. Obviously, we love being in Iowa. More than half of our workforce is our residents of Iowa, because where we're at in the Quad Cities, we do have a lot of Illinois residents still. But the community is great here in Eldridge, Iowa. Everybody is very welcoming. They always have been. And the support we get from not only the community, but the outreach that we do. We work with a lot of local firearms programs, whether they're youth programs, the trap skeet clubs, that sort of stuff, or the Boy Scouts. There's a lot of things that we do, and we just enjoy being here in Iowa and working with and for Iowa. And, keep an eye out. There's a lot of big things that are coming from LMT. Hopefully one of the bigger ones is the MRGGA SOCOM project. It might be LMT's first M designation of a weapon system, used by U.S. military. Obviously, the M203 is something we make. We didn't develop that one. So there's a lot that's coming, and maybe here in the future we'll be able to have another conversation and talk about some other new cool things that are happening.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you very much. Send that over, and we'll make sure we include that in our outside comm so that people know what's coming down and where they can buy it. Obviously.
Sure, absolutely, we'll do.
All right, Joe. Thank you again. Everybody, go to lmtdefense.com. Check them out. Buy some stuff, and keep Iowans rocking and rolling. Thanks again.
Thank you.